Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. We are really happy you join us today because now, today, after already 4 episodes, we are going into something really special and maybe not only or not actually related to just technical stuff. But before we start, let's have a quick introduction. And I suggest we start, and Raphael will be the last person to introduce himself because he will be the one with. You will learn it. So, Vignesh, would you like to start?
Sure, as always. So, hey everyone, my name is Vignesh, been a Microsoft MVP for M365 apps and services for almost a year now. Been working actively on quite a good amount of merger and acquisition related projects where we do a lot of tenant-to-tenant migrations, and I'm here to share some of my learnings here. Thank you.
All right. So, Thomas.
Yeah, hi and good evening wherever you are. Good morning, good night. Thomas, also an MVP since 2012. Same category as Vignesh, also focusing strongly on teams, but also now the acquisition or merger and acquisition, and especially there also in how should I say it in the holistic setup as an architect.
Interesting.
Right. So, myself, I'm Michael, managing partner for a consulting company in Germany. Also, Microsoft MVP, but focusing on Microsoft Teams, adoption and change topics. And I'm really happy to have some interesting conversations, insights with all these experts here. And now let's jump over to Raphael.
The guy today with the audio connection problems.
Oh no.
My name is Raphael.
Oh no.
I'm still and
That's really, really interesting to see, but unfortunately, we cannot hear you because of internet problems. That's interesting. We just thought we fixed it. That was also the reason why we are late for the live stream. And it was everything was perfect from the connection point until he started to introduce himself. So,
Oh.
at least he is smiling.
Yes.
That's interesting to see.
I think it's raining.
Yeah, let's see how it will be if the connection comes back. Oh no, he dropped.
You dropped.
We do have another connection. So let's see if he is reachable there.
Great.
Because actually he wanted to draw something. And therefore he joined with the second device. Yeah.
Right. And as we say, I shouldn't say Banana Republic, but again, sometimes I have the feeling we are in. Yeah. So what?
Okay. I see another picture, a moving picture. So let's try to bring him back. Raphael, how is your internet connection?
very bad. Internet or Restream connection? I don't know.
It works for 3 or 4, so I think it's on your side.
Yeah, it's the Wi-Fi of a hotel. We need in the future 10-to-10 migration and better Wi-Fi hotspots at hotels for migration. So yeah, so sorry.
Actually, no one believe you. Everyone know you are sitting on a island with a white beach, a lot of palm trees, and
No, so sorry. Now let's test with a Mac and hotspot, and hopefully it works better and is stable. Currently, yes. So back to me. Hello, I'm Raphael. I'm the guy with audio connection and internet connection problems. I'm living in Germany, so it's not wondering that it's internet connection and the audio connection problem. Yeah, I'm the legal compliance guy, and I'm happy to be here and happy to have the topic today with 10-to-10 migration. Out of a compliance and legal view, we had a lot of interesting topics to discuss, and not only with me. So yeah, I'm a CEO of a compliance and legal company, and yeah, legal guy, compliance guy, and everything, a computer guy. I don't want to stop the stream with a lot of explanation. Follow me on LinkedIn, you see it. Send me messages via Twitter, and let's start with the topic, Michael.
All right. So today, the plan for today is we go for some topics about legal and compliance. And yeah, we had also some discussions for the different aspects and areas we already had in the previous four live streams. So you can check out these different sessions to get some ideas for specific points. But at the most of these technical discussions, we stopped at the part of legal and compliance. So my idea is we start with a general statement about what you should consider. I was so close to say concern, to be concerned, but to consider. And then let's talk about some special requirements for maybe some parts, especially for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, if there's something special you want to point out. Let's start with the general part.
I would actually just summarize a couple of things.
That's a good point.
We have certain topics. If we see it on a merger, merger means there is a tenant at the moment, assuming the source tenant, the tenant we are migrating, is compliant and fulfills all legal requirements. That could be a statement because we want to assume that at least the company which is bought over has done all the work proper. Now it comes. The tenant itself is the first part. It resists probably in a country which also complies to legal and compliance regulation. There can be even a geographical distributed tenant, but the target, now we are talking about target. First, the target is a complete different legal entity. If it's bought over, or if the company is bought over, here is a merger of legal. If we're talking about M365, Azure, and the other cloud services, for sure, there might be different countries where they want to migrate to. It could be that they say the tenant is entirely, holistically, only in US. What we are going to do. There's a lot of things which needs to be discussed on the legal perspective and on the client perspective. And furthermore, it not only depends on the legal requirements of the company, the corporation itself, also to the different industries. For sure, an industry which is a non-healthcare industry, for example, is completely or has a different subset of legal requirements which needs to be done. First is, if we migrate, is the first part. Always I need to say, on Raphael's hand, it's a little different, but since we are not lawyers, we do not have any Staatsexamen, so which means we are absolutely not supposed to give any legal answer full dot.
Yeah.
But we can raise our finger.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that point. So, specifically when dealing with tenant-to-tenant migrations, for the most part, you would see a lot of technical people and then people from the project management. But if you're dealing with security and compliance related topics, one has to understand that it's just not right to have only these folks involved. as Thomas pointed out, a lawyer or somebody from the legal team, a privacy officer, or a CISO. So we need to make sure that we have these people also in in the committee or forum, because an advice from these people is really really needed. It's just not for the technical folks to go ahead and say, all right, do this, do this. It doesn't work that way. There are a lot of other things also which needs to be taken in mind. So what do you say about that, Raphael?
It's your stage.
It's your stage. Now I can talk 50 minutes about it. No, you are totally right. Thomas and Vignesh, the IT guy, they started in the project when the rest is hopefully clear.
Mhm.
The data transfer, which company will brought, for example, due diligence process, is it closed? And after the process is closed, you get the question of move data from one tenant to another, split data out of another tenant to a new tenant, for example, when you sell a company, they need a new tenant, or move to another software like to Google, or to go on an on-premise system or whatever. But when you have a deeper look in the beginning, you have more and more interesting topics to discuss. And yes, that is the most expensive thing. And sometimes when people ask me, is it more expensive, the tenant-to-tenant migration or the legal part before or while the tenant-to-tenant migration? And one of these topics, while the tenant-to-tenant migration, we discussed 2 sessions before, as we discussed, can we move, or should we move all data to another tenant? And we talked about chat. No, we don't want. But in the contracts, you have to move all data. So you have to think what we do with the data. And often you have to move all data because it's IP, and the next company or the selling company or want to give all the data to the company who brought the one or whatever. So often that's very interesting. And when you said, okay, out of my perspective, when I see this process, is often the legal part more expensive. Yes, we have a lot of IT problems and issues, and you can't do everything, but expensive is more the legal part, because when you only one small example, when you move data from a European tenant to a US tenant, and currently we don't have the right legal basement to transfer this. Hopefully this year we will have it, or we move to China, for example, or to Russia, one of these escalation tenant movements or whatever, and we can't move to Russia, that's okay, but we can move, for example, to China or to a Russian company or whatever. You have a lot of question about, is it allowed? Can we do it? Is it IMEN export regulation? And you have to ask local lawyers. So you ask the lawyer in Europe, for example, or in Germany, or for Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and then you ask the US lawyer, or the Turkish lawyer, for example, when it's a Turkish company connected to this. So, and when you ask, okay, for these topics, you're around 50,000 per country. So you have to deal with 50,000 per country for questions. Can we move? How we move, and everything. And before, when the company don't have a inter-company data agreement, you have to pay around 50,000 to 100,000 on top, so that you can move data or into your company, or move data out of the concern. Only the data privacy question. So yeah, you had a lot of in these legal checklists you have to do. And then when everything is fine, you guys coming, or also sometimes me, and said, okay, now we want to move. And what we want to move. And then you have the next legal discussion about, can we move everything? Can we move only a part? What is allowed? And then it's more interesting. And then you had the next legal discussion about adoption at the end. Is it allowed to tell the employees, or do you have to tell the employees about the movement? And this is very, very interesting, because sometimes employees have in their contract an additional part for, we using centralized tools in our concern, and then it's okay. You can move data through one to right to another country and everything. If not, you have to tell them, and hopefully you don't need a consent for this. So you have in every part of this, you have legal questions you have to solve, or you have to think about it. And on the other side, then you have the technical part. Vignesh, we talked in the sessions before about it,
Yeah.
that, for example, you can't move labels. You can't move trainable classifier. You have to build the compliance processes one more time. Insider risk, communication compliance, you have to process one more time. Often you can say, okay, when you move to another tenant, when you move to another company or split a company, you need a new process. But if have a look in your eyes and the eyes of a lot of customers, they don't want to switch the process. They want to have the old process. It works. It's fine. And they don't want to build a new process one more time. And so, yeah, legal things and technical things on both sides.
There's one question which always lingers on my tongue, so to speak. Actually, as I said at the beginning, we assumed that we could theoretically migrate. But on the other hand, if we now assume that the legal agreements and verifications between the merged customer or the merged entities is not really final, and we are doing a move, are we liable or not?
That's very interesting. It's a question who close a contract with you. Often the newcomer or the company who brought the other company or brought the data, and they said, okay, start to move.
Yeah, it's most likely the company who buys.
Who buys it and say, it's okay, we start with we sell you, we give you the start, and now start the process. At the end, you don't have to check if it's okay or whatever. Often you have to ask the question before and said, okay, when the company who pays us and said it's okay, we are fine, you can move, then start with the move. Often, when we discussed about the technical things, often you need an API connection or a global administrator to the other tenant. And when you get this is the hardest part in IT security. And the IT security of the selling company don't give you the global administrator to move, for example, or to have access. So often it's not out of my perspective, not a issue of the company who make the administrator or who make the movement itself. But yes, if you are totally 100% correct, you can move when everything on legal side is fine, or when 90% is fine, and you have only the question in proceeding and operation.
Yeah, and that would bring me even to the next question. If we talk about regulated industry, so that means if I take whatever, maybe technical drawing of a weapon system, for example,
wonderful.
That means I don't know what it is. If they write that file as sunflower and I touch it and move it, meaning there need to be a classification and data identification even for regulated industries actually before, so that those data will be identifiable at least, because as we touch it, and that I understand, if I take the tank and send that tank to Iran or whatever, it's definitely it is not the company who said move it. So that means if you put it on a truck, it's also the truck driver who has the problem. And since we are the truck driver, we also would step into a problem if we move classified data.
Correct. And it's the same if you move a tank or move the data of the construction of a tank or of a weapon to another company, which is not allowed. So that's just what I mean in the beginning with IM and export regulations. And you have these IM and export regulation, and you have, for example, with Russia, in this case, you have EU regulation that you as an architect and as an IT guy, it's not allowed to help Russia or to help companies in Russia or to help companies in North Korea or whatever. So you have this regulation on top. So IM and export and this regulation as the two examples. And I think when you have to look into the attachments of your contract, of your company, hopefully sometimes these attachments are very long for IT services of movement and migration, and in these very long attachments, there are some attachments of that hopefully your company and also the other IT companies said, okay, in export regulation and other regulations, that's a part of the company who pay for us and is the contractor, and they have to fulfill this regulation.
Absolutely.
That's the best way, because you can't know what is a part of this. You get the truck and you have to move the truck. And yes,
would be in a box, so to
yeah,
speak.
correct. And this is a different,
as we say
correct,
in German, nicht wissen schützt vor Strafe.
yeah,
So that
yeah,
means if I touch it, it
yeah,
is
correct.
a problem. And that, by the way, belongs also not only to this, it could also be on a patent, if there's a patent behind.
Yeah, correct. And often you have to say before, and in this attachment of the movement contract or the IT contract, there's often a part like this is 2 or 6 sentences about when it's something on regulatory, the other company has to move. But if you move and you know, okay, there is nothing with weapons, for example, tanks, construction, everything, and by the move, you know this and you see this data, you have to stop. So when the company don't tell you, yeah, and you see it in the movie, then you have to stop and say, oh, let me check, write a letter to the company. I see this data and I know this is not allowed because we need, of the national regulatory, we need a yes to move these data. This is official, also for you, official. Not, you don't need to ask a lawyer or whatever. It's official for everyone that you can't move this data. Then it's better to write a letter and say, oh, I see this data, we can't move it. Or do you have a green paper or allow letter that allows you to move the data? Then we can proceed forward. And yeah, that's a little bit of it.
It is the thing of, we said, the company who is doing the merger should be legally proper prepared. They have done the due diligence. All fine. But on the other hand, soon we come to a very simple topic, actually legal hold.
Yeah.
The lawyers are completely overwhelmed with, oops. I said, okay, if you do not know even on legal hold data, and that's the easiest part, how should I believe that whatever else I transferred, it's still legal?
Yeah, correct. And often legal hold and regulatory record. And Vignesh, you know, regulatory record you can't delete. Exactly, you have to reduce the time, and then you hopefully they delete. But legal hold and regulatory record, that's often a reason why it stays in the old tenant sometimes. Or is it a single tenant and you move it together, it stays in the single tenant for the time, for example, of a judgment or for a trial of a process in arbitration law or whatever. It stays in the old tenants because it's a very high discussion also in legal, also with some experts, if it's allowed to move a legal hold file. Because it's not legal hold. It's you move it and maybe you can change it while the move, or can you explain the move at the same time? So often it stays in the tenant. Yeah. You change it. Yeah. So
it's a new file. It's not a move. That's maybe even in this round the good part, even for our audience, to make it very clear. There is no things like a move. You are not moving something. You are not taking a physical share and move it from one room into another. So it's not equal. That means like it's a copy. The data is a copy, which we are doing, and the copy is something completely different. And that means
this is not allowed for legal hold. In US, for example, you have to stay also in Europe, and that's the same with the regulatory record things. Is it allowed to copy a bill, for example, that is allowed for you from the finance institute, that you can store it in digital one, so that you can print it out later or whatever, with the BSI, for example, in Germany, or a Resi-Scan-Verfahren, it's called in Germany. That's a process that someone making pictures of bills and you can store it in SharePoint or whatever and put a regulatory record on it, or put a record in it and then copy it. That's the same. And this is a huge issue for not for put a single tenant to move together or move a single tenant to another single tenant. But it's often when you split a company.
Yeah.
There's the issue. When you split a company, because you can't split these files. So often for the financial things, I ask the national authority, is it allowed to move it to another tenant or need to stay in the old tenant? Because when it stays in the old tenant, you need from the old company access to the old tenant where you don't get access. The company selling it away. So that's often not possible. So this is one of the challenges, and my solution is I ask the authority, is it okay to move? We need to move. Is it okay? We can't leave it there, or do we need to print it out? And one of the authorities said to me, okay, print it out of the old tenant, then you can delete it, and in paper, you give it in paper to the new company.
Possible. It is even, how should I say, sometimes I have the feeling, okay, the legal part, it's not that fast as the technology, or it do not follow the same speed, because of, it could be simply, oh, Raphael frozen again, but it could be simply on the same hard disk in a data center, but with kind of technical boundaries, so to speak. But it belongs logically, not physically on the same disk. Logically, it can belong to someone else. And I can remember I had this discussion, and it's not a client, so that's why I can name it. Everyone knows probably the NetApp filers. And we had the discussion on data separation on NetApp filers. That's 15 years ago already. We said we could legally, and we were even able to logically segregate data and use the filer actually for multiple information barriers. It was at this spot. So it is like the companies who deal with a lot of money produce something and so on, that you know what it was. But at the end, even if because we were talking about credit card data, we needed a physical head per credit card company they printed the cards. And that was something where I said, yeah. We checked it with the lawyers against it, and the lawyer said, there's no problem. And the credit card said, okay, we are our own legal entity, so we do this, done. That's in our audit. We haven't actually explored. It's like that, you buy more. We said, okay, then we put another 100,000 on heads in.
Yeah, correct. And these are the money or the budget that a lot of people are missing. As I said, we have budget for movement, not for every single movement, but the minimize, it's okay. But for the legal and for asking other lawyers in other countries, we don't have budget. And one big hint is also when you are company and make this move, you need a contract for proceeding personal data with the new company, for example, or the company who sells the other one, and you need one with the old one. And this is often also missing, because for movement, you get access via API, you get access via global administrator, for example, and you can proceed also the personal data of the old company, which is split away, for example, and you need also a personal data contract with the old one. And this is often missing. And when then there's a fault, or someone said, okay, and goes to the national authorities, and, oh, they're proceeding my data and moving to USA. Yeah, I have a lot of hard discussions about it. So it's better, you need also a contract with the other company. And often this is missing. And often a move is not really very easy on both ways. And we learn it with the IT topics and the last things, and also on legal and compliance, it's the same. For legal, you have a lot of parts, and compliance with IMIN export and all of this. Yes, you have to think about it. And at the end, I have a checklist for this. And this checklist is a Excel file, because everyone can open it worldwide, with more than 300 points.
Absolutely.
You have to check. Yeah, that's it. And this is only the legal part. And on the other side, you have the IT compliance part, the peer review part. Very funny. And we talked about it. And Vignesh, that's also around 50, 60 points. You have to train the classifier one more time. You have to rebuild the encryption, and then I have a session last year on double key encryption last Saturday, and think about double key encryption with hold your own key, and you need this because you want to store high sensitive data. And that's okay, but on the legal side, you can store it also in the new tenant and also in the new region or a new country. That's allowed, but you need to hold your own key solution as a IT security part or as a legal part. For example, in Germany, when you proceed, for example, with the Bundeswehr and then proceed with the army, you have a special regulation for encryption. And now it's very interesting. You have to bring the DKE from one tenant to another tenant with the same level of encryption. And then what I do is then we change the double key, make a key rotation in the new tenant so that the old tenant don't have access to the new one. But you have to encrypt, to decrypt and then encrypt one more time. So that's not very easy. And and if it's only 3% of the data, but when you have 5 terabit of data, 3% are a lot of data. And that's a problem. You need to be compliant in the whole process. And that's encryption is one more time, retention is one more time, very interesting. And the other thing is the imman export things. You have to think about it, if it's allowed or if it's not allowed. And you as a working company who move, it can be sometimes your fault if you don't think about it. So every one of us needs to be a little data privacy guy, a little compliance guy. And Thomas, like Vignesh in your team,
exactly.
He has to say sometimes, oh, stop, please. Let's go one move back before we have to pay 5 million, for example, as a fault. And it's not a fault from the company who pays for us. So it's a fault out of the national regulation.
Totally agree. In fact, I have two follow-up questions based on the points that you have brought up. So one is for Raphael, and the next follow-up is basically for our adoption guru Michael here. So there are different technologies when we talk about security and compliance, right? So of course we spoke about legal hold, the hold that we apply on files, let's say in SharePoint, OneDrive, then the Teams chat, even on mails. Then we also spoke about the retention labels and policies, right? And then you also have the Microsoft information protection labels and policies. Then you have some DLP policies, insider risk management. There are so many policies. And my understanding based on whatever we discussed is all these policies are tightly integrated with the tenant, right? There is no way you could just pick this policy and put it inside another tenant and say this is going to work, or it doesn't move along with the file itself, right? So how do you deal with all these different set of policies which are tightly integrated, mainly the information protection policies and labels, your DLP, insider risk management? So that's my question to Raphael and Thomas, whomever. And coming to you, Michael, of course, after all this happens, there is a huge amount of adoption which needs to happen, specifically for security and compliance. Now users need to understand, okay, how do they apply all these labels back? What do they do with the retention policies? What do they do with their MIP policies or DLP, right? So how do we deal with those things?
So first, Tenant-to-Tenant Migration is also a Microsoft Preview project. So sorry, you have to rebuild in the new tenant. And sometimes, yes, while the migration with Microsoft Graph or with PowerShell, you said, okay, you get the same label. And for me, it's more you make shift and lift. So bring the old labels to the new tenant with the same structure and then start to change. And this is then the adoption topic. On the other side, you have a very interesting legal question. Because when you move a tenant, for example, from Germany to Australia, or to Singapore, so in this APAC region, and you have different retention time period. Which time period is okay? Is it the old one or is it the new one? So very interesting question. Is it 5 years in Europe or do we need 10 years in Australia? For the old files, not for the new ones. For the new ones, easy. It created in Australia, it's a part of Australia, 10 years. But the old ones, So often in this part, what I do is you have two labeling sets. You have the new one and you have the old one, which you take with you, and then you have to think about it, what happened now. So and it's a process of that you have at the end only 5% of old data with old labels, and you get more and more data and work with this. So that is very interesting, and often it's also a question for a local lawyer. Is it okay to relabel a file to another time period, and the time period is running? So that's very interesting. The time period is running while you discuss this. So, and it can't start at the same time. So very, very a lot of question. But before I give it to Michael, Microsoft Preview helps us a lot. I see another labeling from SAP or whatever. Microsoft Preview, the time period comes with the location and the guy who is the licensing guy who brings it with you. So it comes with the location, and it helps a lot that you get to bring your retention period with you into the new country, and that's what I love. So that's it's possible, but yeah, a lot of to do for Michael, or
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely the hardest point. When you start with your journey, we already had this discussion. You explain what's going on. And as I learned in this session, it sounds like there should be some contracts in place already. So you should have a legal fundamental. And there you can have an idea about how you would like to proceed with the technical part. And this is the point where you start with a user adoption, because you have to bring up the default mechanisms. Like you get a management sponsor, and someone from management is explaining what's going on from the global perspective. Someone about from the technical management will explain there are some hiccups, there will be some changes. Then you get more details about the differences, how you work. And then you get even more details and trainings when you start on a item level, like what's happening with the data, what's up on the new site, what is about the handling with any labels, how is it going on with the files itself, with emails, with conversations. I know you shouldn't do it, but you have to explain it, and there you can help the users, of course. You said it, Raphael, with the first step brings these things from the old to the new tenant, make it look familiar, make it look a bit understandable, because they used the old labels, they understand how it was with the previous configuration, and there you should start. And then don't put in too many new things at the first level.
And one question directly to this. You have the old employees who move with the data with the company, for example. What do you do with the new ones? They have to learn two retention policies. They have to learn the old legal architecture they don't expect and they don't know because they live in another country. For example, from only the move from Germany to UK is a move of very different legal entities and legal aspects and legal history and ethics. That's it's on a legal base very different, or not very different. It's different, and now you have these different levels: legal, IT, and a new system.
Yeah, and usually you don't start on a green field, so you can hope you just add a new information from the new tenant. But if there's nothing like this in place, then you have to start a completely different campaign. So, as you said, I was talking about the old users with the moving with the data. When you talk about the new users, you have to, at the first place, you can hide some features for the users who move with the data. This is available, for the other ones it's not. But at some point, you will enforce to use these new regulations also for the old company. So you don't move the data and you lose your restrictions. So you don't want to reduce the security level at any place. So you will at least have the same security level, and usually you bring it up. Usually in a best case, you bring this new Let me set up the scenario here. The new company has a lower security level as a board company. Then you have to raise the security level on the new company before you start with the migration, because you will risk some data and maybe risk some security issues just because you set up the lower security level. If you agree, and that's the point you already said, Raphael, if you set up a contract and you say, I know the risk, I will do this, and I will maybe remove some security instances, then the truck driver can deliver, but and knows how to handle that. But usually there is a reason for these security settings, especially when you talk about some encryption. Definitely with double key encryption, it's a whole different story. But also encryption in general. So you bring up the security level, make it equal to the old tenant, and therefore you start with your adoption journey right before you start to move any data, because you will have to train the users, you have to tell them the story, you have to bring up some knowledge into your IT, starting with articles, campaigns, descriptions, hotline training, messaging. So you have to start the whole journey with user adoption. And we will talk about user adoption in 2 streams. So I will talk about this a bit more in detail, also from the theoretical part, with the different levels and supports, how you handle the resistances. And so we will talk about this. But in general, you start with an explanation. You bring it to the tenant, start marketing, tell them the good side, and don't hide the bad side, but be more loud. Be louder about the good side. Be honest with the users, and then you have an equal level, and then you can start with the technical migration.
It makes it complicated, I guess, if I see actually it's flooding the users with information. So it needs to be planned proper pretty well. And actually, I would always say that there should be, beside of the due diligence, there should be even a pre-IT and communication project, so that this can be actually scheduled and digested as well. Of course, if you come up with a new tenant, not only finding it, whatever else, it's also with all the regulatories and compliance topics, it's different. That means getting actually the minimum communication out to the users, because not all data. So if I write an email about, do you go for lunch? Still, it's not affected, but you should identify the groups which can actually make it to a certain level of data which is protection wise or protection worthy, so to speak. And that's actually really tough. And I never ever saw that in a company on the mergers that was done well enough. I don't want to say that they did illegal things. That would be definitely too much. But everything hasn't been thought well enough about it.
So Thomas, can you compare it with the tenant-to-tenant migration into a new tenant for a new bunch of people, like creating a new Microsoft 365 tenant and starting with Microsoft 365?
Actually, we do, yes.
Okay.
It's a
yeah.
nightmare work, and the customer. That the problem here is most likely it is seen always as an IT project.
Mhm.
And they never want to spend money for IT. That was 40 years ago, it was 10 years ago, and it's today the same. So a tenant-to-tenant comparison, as we said. So if you go back to my tenant migration thingy free ebook, it's the first section, actually. Do a proper setup of the peoples involved. Next thing is do a tenant-to-tenant comparison, at least from a technical perspective. And it's a long document. Have the next sessions between the CIO CIO, maybe CTO, the CLO, legal officer, so what, and bring them in. Say that's it. Identify it not only on labels. There's a lot of things more, and even at the very early stage, talk about that legal hold thingy, which is always forgotten. And I cannot say why, but it's always the same. It's repeating.
I can say you why. Because it's not so easy. It's not like a SharePoint site you can move from right to left.
Yeah.
You have to think about it. And now there are a bunch of things in the tenant, like legal hold, Vignesh labels, everything of this. You forgot very easy because it's not so easy to migrate, and you have to think about it before a lot. So you forgot it. And on the other side, when we summarize a little bit, we can say legal and compliance is often a missing topic, like adoption, and often a project has not enough budget because it's not clear, and it's a little bit of a dark hole what happened by a 10-to-10 migration.
Yeah.
So at the summary, everyone who wants to make a 10-to-10 migration next time has to watch our videos before and then think about the budget and the legal guys and the adoption guys, and think about it, the main issues or the main challenges, challenges you have to solve before.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
that's really a topic. I cannot emphasize it enough. And when I see that they most likely see a tenant-to-tenant, most customers, I can say every customer see it as a simple IT project by copying something from left to right. And copy was like robocopy before, something pretty easy and straightforward. It is not. There are legal topics. You are not migrating from one file server to another within the same location, same company. You're doing something different. And for me, it was even pretty easy because you just took the entire holistic infrastructure and actually moved it physically, so to speak. And then it belonged to someone else. So you sold it. You only need to take care about selling. But here it's something different. You have something in between, and you need to do something to the data itself. And then you can see how you can integrate it. And this advisory services before the identification of the differences, the discrepancy, so to speak, between the tenants, not only is I can create groups or I can't create groups as a normal user. That is not important. Just follow it and communicate it. That's fine. But the legal thing behind. And I'm always worried.
Thomas, and I compare it a second time, because if you move data from on-premise to cloud or from one tenant to another, you have the same level, the same quantity of question out of a legal perspective. The one thing is from on-premise to cloud is okay, we go to a cloud provider, this is new, but moving from one cloud to another, from one region to another, you have the same discussions. That's very, very interesting. Often they said, okay, moving from on-premise to cloud, we need a big process. We need the data privacy officers, the IT security, it's cloud. It's not our device. It's not our laptop with the data. This is a laptop which now works, okay? And the other thing is, the other 10 for me is the same, like, it's Oslo. another tenant. It's another region. It's another one. It's another new one. So
Yeah.
for me, it's the same on both sides.
It is, and I should say, in some projects, it pops up from the IT department actually, which is integrated, that they ask, what should we do in the target? How? I said, wait, you have even not conducted the company merger itself, so the responsibilities and whatever else, and then the next alarm bell is actually ringing. I said, luckily, when it is maybe within a country boundaries or boundary, that makes at least let me sleep pretty well.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So everything is saying and summarized, and sometimes we add some legal parts to the migration book. No. You have some fun as a part of this. So yeah, but I will summarize a little bit at the end. So yeah, we will see. Thank you very much. I don't want to close, but we are so a lot in time, and we are so out of our every time. So I will give back to Michael.
And I hope we have
Alright.
scared everyone more than enough, I believe.
Yeah.
At least make them think. I hope that's our
Yeah.
goal. So don't take it on the easy shoulder. If I translate that proverb directly, there is more behind. It's not only moving,
Yeah, exactly.
copying. Use the right word. Michael, sorry. That
Correct.
was
Actually, I thought we could take the last 10 minutes and put it at the advertiser as a trailer for the whole series to explain. It sounds pretty easy, but it's really, really tough and has different aspects to think about. So yeah, I learned a little bit. No, I learned a lot about legal, and especially these pre-contract things before you start actually moving some data. So thank you very much for these details here. In our next session, which is planned for the 22nd of May, or whenever you consume the video on demand, it depends on you, will be about device migration. So we have a special guest, Ruth, will join us in the next session, and we'll talk about the device migration. And there, thank you very much to all of you. And before I forgot it, we have thought about a Q&A session, especially just for your questions. And I put in a link here. You can use this link also. I think you will find it in a video description. So let's have a look into the details there. You can put your questions in there, or you reach out to one of us on social media. So feel free to raise your questions. We also put all the questions together we already have from these questionnaires and also during our sessions. And then we have a dedicated session. And we will announce it loud and clear over social media, because you can join us and ask your questions live as well. So I don't know the date right now, but we will do it. I think at the end, I think that it makes sense, because then you have all the different aspects we can talk about, and you can raise your questions with more details.
I think I
All right.
Azure Blue Water when that session is. Yeah, guys, so cool. Thank you.
Good. So
Right.
thank you very much. We see us live on the 22nd of May, and with devices. Until then, enjoy the videos. See you there. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.